can play in the fight to put an end to racism in this country. We have assembled, by any measure, a remarkable panel tonight. We would like to introduce them one by one and thank them for joining us before we begin our discussion. We begin with the Texans linebacker, Brennan Scarlett, a leader both on and off the field for that franchise. Thank you for joining us, Brennan. Dash star Jamia Fields joins us from Utah, where the Dash have restarted their 2020 season. Welcome, Jamia. Natalie Hinds joins us. She is a Texas native and a 20-time All-American swimmer at the University of Florida, currently training as an Olympic hopeful in Georgia. Selvin Young, a Houston native and a star running back for the University of Texas team that won the 2005 national title. He is also an entrepreneur and very involved in his community here in Houston. A former standout for the Texans, one of the great voices of sports here in this city, Travis Johnson, joins us as well. And our great friend, the network college football analyst, as well as my co-host on Texans Inside the Game, the one and only Spencer Tillman. Thank you again for taking time with us for this great discussion and a much-needed discussion. We're going to begin here. Does sports have the power to lead the fight to put an end to racism, as well as lead the fight for social justice reform in this country? Spencer, let's start with you.
I think they do. I think sport has always occupied a unique position, Greg. You're going all the way back to Branch Rickey bringing in Jackie Robinson in the late 40s. I think it can do the same thing here in 2020. I think the issue is, though, these younger players, particularly those on the collegiate level, need some guidance. You know, if you're 17, 18, 19, 20 years of age, it's going to take a while for them to get the maturity that's required to leverage the strength that they do have. So I think the sports is uniquely positioned in our culture to do things beyond the white lines. And to me, Greg, as a closing statement, I think that sports is uniquely positioned more than any other institution on the planet because of its ability to galvanize people to solve problems and social values.
Jamia, you hold a very unique spot, not only as a professional athlete in this country, but also as someone that young girls and women in this country look up to. Do you feel like sports has the power to lead the charge to put an end to racism?
Definitely. It's definitely been an interesting couple months here, but whether you have a big platform, small platform, I feel like we all have a voice. Us athletes, we have a lot of eyes on us. There's many little girls who look like me and don't look like me who are looking for answers or have gone through the similar experiences that I have. So putting certain statements out that I have based on my experiences, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback that, hey, like people are struggling with the same things. And so it's been great. And a lot of my teammates, we've had amazing 60,000 people for George Floyd. And so that it was, I mean, I don't have the words to really describe that, but at 26, my first protest and seeing my teammates rally around me, my organization rally around me, definitely sports, you know, we can change this. We have a platform, so.
It has been a remarkable time, and it's great that you were able to take part in an event that has shaped so much of the discussion here in Houston. Natalie Hinds, how do you plan on using your platform as an Olympic hopeful to lead the charge for change in this country?
Well, like Jamia said, everyone loves sports. Everyone's going to be involved in their own respective sports. So I feel like with my platform, I can use it to educate those, especially those that are trying to learn and trying to just figure out why history is the way it is and just try and, you know, how can they aid Black people in just fighting for equality. But I guess the way that I would help would be, like I said, just to educate, to be involved in more organizations that are reaching out to the Black community and just kind of figuring out how we can get them involved in ways that they aren't involved right now.
Brennan Scarlett, you have a remarkable platform as a member of the National Football League as well as the Houston Texans. How powerful of a platform is that for you to call for significant change?
You know, it's an extremely powerful platform from that perspective. I think that, you know, as you said, you know, with sports having the ability to kind of change the narrative and influence culture, I think it really does because of how unifying sport can be, you know, regardless of your background, your ethnicity, where you come from, what you believe. You know, if your team is, you know, the Texans or your team is the Dash, I mean, regardless who you are, you're rallying around that. right? And I think that, that's something that is extremely powerful in this country. And so, for me, to have the platform as a Houston Texan, as an NFL player, when, having the eyes on me that I do, I think, it's my responsibility to make sure that my voice and my beliefs are being heard on those platforms, and that, all of the people that come from the different places that they do, understand where I'm coming from. And I think that that's important, just having a united voice and united front from, all different athletes and regardless of your walk of life.
Selvin Young, as you hear this and these perspectives, how does this strike you with the power of sport? It's been perhaps a few years since you were involved directly, but you've stayed in touch, I know, with the folks at the University of Texas, and I know that you have to stay in touch with some of your former teammates from the National Football League.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic, and sports, for me personally, just having teammates from all different walks of life, all different economic backgrounds, different colors, different races, being in sports and, fighting for a common goal, family, team camaraderie ship. There's some things with sports that goes on to build people, build character, and allows people to know someone for who they are outside of a color or skin or a title. Sports and the platform that we have, that we gain from that. Me personally, I do like to share, a family-oriented community come together type of a vibe with everything. And it started, as a kid, having coaches from different colors, different skins coming, helping, coming into the community, just taking a chance, opportunity that's being given. I think that this topic that's going on nationally is something that is eye-awakening, it's eye-opening. And, people like us, athletes, black, white, brown, to talk about it is the opportunity for people to learn and understand and share things that they have in common, which brings people closer.
Travis Johnson, will let you wrap up this first question.
Oh, no.
If even just the National Football League were to harness all of its power and make significant strides towards social justice reform and an end to racism, what could the end result possibly be?
Well, I think the end result would be great. The problem is, is just that I think we need to realize that our platform has to be used for the right way. I think a lot of these coaches have to realize, especially on the college level and on the national football level, is some of these young black kids haven't had experiences with the other side until they get to college, until they get to the NFL, and their position coach is of the other race. So I think that's a big deal. I think the platform itself can help, but I think it starts with each of the coaches in the building. I think it starts with the mothers and fathers in their house, because without them, no matter what platform you have, you can always say, "Oh, I root for this team." But yeah, if you root for this team, but yet you won't let Deshaun Watson sit down and have dinner at your restaurant because if you don't know who he is, that it makes no difference. So I think it can help, but I think it always starts in the house first, and then I think after that it goes to these coaches. I think the coaches at every single level, they have more impact on young minds in general than anybody else. When you talk about your Pee Wee League football coach, you remember that guy. When you talk about your middle school coach, you remember him, along with your high school coach. And I think those are the guys that can make the most impact, because I know for me personally, one of the first times I had any dealing with a Caucasian man was when it was on the football field, and that was kind of shaped my life and shaped kind of how I thought towards the other people. So I think it starts at the house, but I think the coaches have a lot bigger role than I think they realize.
And that continues as well as the high school level. We have seen some remarkable local coaches messaging to their players, and it's been incredibly powerful, Travis. For many, one of the most significant things that we have seen since George Floyd's death is athletes taking ownership of their own messaging. And that includes what it really means for athletes to take a knee during the national anthem. Jamia, you and your Dash teammates were able to do that. How would you describe that moment, and what did that mean to you?
Well, that was a huge moment for me. It's the first time I had knelt during the national anthem, and this is my 6th year professionally. So it was a big decision, but then again, it didn't take a lot of thought. I knew what I wanted to do come first game, and a lot of my teammates, joined me. But I put the statement out that, I've had family that served in the military, and, my respect is, for the military, for our country. But the social injustice is what we're fighting, and that's what, means the most to me right now and always. But right now I specifically have the platform to do that, and CBS, it's on the platform, a huge platform. All our games are aired, so I knew it was, a big moment. So.
And as you look back, what stands out about that moment?
Well, about that moment, I think the word that comes to mind is unity. There were a lot of, teammates, staff, shocked that, they stood behind us, stood behind, fighting social injustice, becoming uncomfortable in that situation, especially, not being Black and doing that, becoming uncomfortable. It was huge. So unity is the word, and I think that needs to continue to bring change.
Natalie Hinds, swimming is a bit of a different sport in that regard. Could you imagine taking a knee during the national anthem, perhaps on the podium, if you won Olympic gold?
No, that's actually not a thought that I've had. I think, like I was saying earlier, I think education is one of my biggest things that I want to get through to everyone who doesn't understand, who's in the swimming community. So in terms of the podium, I actually hadn't even thought of that, but that would be something that would make sense, especially in this climate right now. By the time the Olympics rolls around, I do hope that things have, taken a turn for the better. But definitely trying to be a resource for people in the sport of swimming, because it is a predominantly white sport, is the route that I would love to take, and that I have been taking using my platform and, starting with the people around me, my coaches and my teammates, and hopefully it's going to spread from there.
Brennan Scarlett, do you plan on taking a knee during the anthem at Texans games, and what is the message that you want fans to take from that?
I think, whatever way that the Texans decide to protest, I think it's important that we all do it together. I want it to be united, similar to how Jamia, they had their team all together and kneeling, with her. And I think that, that's really important, from the messaging of that. And I think, to fans and to people watching, I think that it's important to know that, this is not about the disrespecting of the military, of the country, of anything of that nature. I think it's more so, and it's all about trying to right the wrongs, trying to point out and highlight the wrongs of the social injustice and the mistreatment of our Black and brown communities in this country since its genesis. And so I think that is the most important thing, the most important takeaway. And I think it's really important for fans to realize that, many of the players, if not a majority, probably definitely a majority of the players come from, underserved and disadvantaged communities, Black and brown communities specifically. So you have to take a moment and realize just how important this issue is, because these are not issues that, guys just look through their timelines and they see it on their Instagram or Twitter feeds. These are issues that a lot of times they grew up with, they dealt with, whether it's, the economic disparities, whether it's the educational disparities. This is something that guys have dealt with in their lives. And so as fans, and when you're watching these athletes, protest, whether it's taking a knee or posting and then their voices be heard, I think it's important to really take that next step and think into why and have the empathy and support, those people doing that, because it's a courageous move. As we've seen in the past, guys who have and women who have protested in that way have, it's disrupted their livelihoods. And so it's important to realize that it's courageous and brave. And I think, for fans, it's important that they realize that and respect that.
Brennan, if I could follow up with you, what did it mean to you that Texans coach Bill O'Brien not only offered to take a knee with his players if that's what they wanted to do, but also gave a very, very passionate call for an end to racism in this country, well beyond just the sports world?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me one bit at all. I think, Coach O'Brien's always been supported, from my perspective going into my fifth season, has always been supportive of us as players, and especially as black players. And, he's well educated and knows, the effects of the disadvantages in this country. And I think that, him voicing that and voicing his support is really important. Again, going back to being united and having a united stand, against racism and trying to find ways to combat some of these things, whether they're, growth in the community or change from a policy level. I think that, having the support, from a head coach and general manager, is really important.
Changes have already come that we've seen in the National Football League, and particularly perhaps in college football. How significant is it that college football players are now holding their coaches accountable, their programs accountable, and their universities in some case accountable? Selvin Young, we have seen dramatic calls for change at your alma mater at the University of Texas. How significant is that?
I think it's huge. I think it's huge for a guy to speak on how he feels. As kids, elementary school, as black men, we flip through pages in a book and we see things that happen to people about skin color, from the moment that we were young to middle school to high school. And the more you start to realize, you understand that there's a real disparage. There's something going on there in this world and society. And race has a lot to do with it. For a young man to say, hey, I feel a certain way about a certain thing that I see or that I hear or that I'm speaking or I'm singing, for the people to say, hey, I understand that. I want to listen to you. I want to hear what you're saying. I'm thankful that the university has taken that standpoint. A final decision hasn't been made as far as some of the changes that those guys have asked for. But to see a university that's mine to speak, back to the students and say, hey, we hear you. We like to understand where you're coming from. We don't know what that ultimate decision will be that they're going to make. But, I'm proud of those guys. I'm proud of guys all across the country. I'm thankful for a lot of the coaches and athletic directors that are saying, hey, some of these things that these guys are saying, it's up to us to allow them to be on our campus and feel accepted and feel a part of this, university or this family that we have. And if there's anything, if there's a sign, if there's a song, if there's anything that makes a person feel like they felt when they started to flip through those pages as young kids in elementary and middle school and understanding like, hey, man, this was a long time ago. And my forefathers and my grandparents and great-great-grandparents went through this, but I'm still feeling the effects of it. I still feel for what I see and what I hear. And there's moments in time where it come up and it's just straight in your face. For an athlete to come from what we call the hood or low economic areas and then go to colleges where, the African American is 3 to 5 to 7% of the entire population. And then to feel disenfranchised or, by whatever it is. I think it's important for the university and for anyone to say, hey, we do have a group of guys or group of gals or people that are trying to come here and get educated and be better and go out be leaders in the world. But we have something that is holding them back from expressing themselves. And the fact that they're allowing those guys to speak their voices, I think it's big. I'm looking forward to seeing what the total complete outcome is on that particular University of Texas and those things. But I see some things changing across the country. I see Clemson. I see other schools that are making moves. And, as athletes, we look back at it and I can say I'd appreciate it. I didn't know much about the song that I was singing. It hurt my heart once I learned. So I'm thankful that, the guys are saying, hey, I want to learn and I want to listen to why that makes you feel a certain way. And I think that's more so what everyone is wanting to do. We're saying we feel a certain way about something, and opposed to someone saying, hey, well, disregarding that, I like to see from an educational standpoint, universities across the country make better decisions as far as listening and hearing.
Travis Johnson, it has been an interesting time at your alma mater at Florida State with players calling for change, and some of those changes were granted almost immediately. How significant is that, and what would you like to see grow from that?
Well, of course, we want to see a lot of growth. I mean, when you look at some of the things that have gone on throughout college football, I mean, not just at Florida State. I think it's big for these kids to be able to one, start voting, and one, speak up. And I know what Selvin said is it's great for the coaches to listen and the university to listen and say, we want to hear this. But I think, listening with no action, it means absolutely nothing. It's smoke and mirrors until something is gotten done. And I think that's what a lot of universities, it's all great. It's all good for the conversation. Nobody wants to see themselves as going against history, going against what is right. And I mean, until they show me action, I'm kind of going to take all this stuff with a grain of salt. I mean, I've seen Florida State make changes, of course. When Marvin called out coach to make sure that they were able to do certain things, to make sure they were able to speak their voice. But I mean, it's such a long list, especially for a lot of these historically, I guess would you say, white universities. That are especially in the South for a lot of us. I mean, we got a young lady on here from Gainesville. I wanted to boo her earlier, but because I'm a no. But at the same time, they're going through a lot down there as well, and it's stuff that comes with the territory because we went to school in the South. I mean, you won't have any of these problems at FAMU. You won't have any problems at Jackson State, Howard, Morris Brown, all of these different these historically black colleges that were originally for us, so it's going to take time to get change, and I would love to see them do it right now. But, forgive me, Greg, if I say I just don't believe half of them going to do anything about it when it's all said and done. I mean, it's fine and dandy to listen to you. It's fine and dandy to say, all right, I hear you guys. But, when those big boosters, you've heard it, Greg, I mean, Selvin, you've heard it at UT for years, when y'all had the last head coach. What happened when he first got there, and the tone and the rhetoric that was used, and now you hear the same thing is, if you take this person's name off here, we're gonna take this money. So I think right now, yeah, it's fine and dandy to listen, but what are they gonna do when the pressure goes on? When that $1 billion booster says, well, I'm gonna take my money if you change the name from Doak Campbell Stadium. I'm gonna take my money if you take this name off of this building. I'm gonna take my money. Then that's when, you know what? When you can stand up for the right thing against adversity and against everybody else, that's when you're showing me something. So I'm praying every day that these things happen. But, forgive me for not really just, applauding any of these schools yet until I actually see action, because it's easy to listen. It's like your parents used to tell you to clean up, and as soon as they leave, you back to doing what you were doing because you really didn't care what they said. I do it when I have to do it. So I think a lot of these people are going to do it when they have to do it. And right now, until they hurt where they love it the most in their pockets, I don't see them doing anything anytime soon.
Well, one thing very briefly, man, there's no forgiving you because I want to hear what you have to say. And you're right. Actions speak louder than words. And I absolutely back you up on what you said. I've covered college sports for 30 plus years, and I think I've seen it all. Spencer Tillman, man, Travis brings up a lot of great points there. Will we see action after the promises that have been made to some of these athletes at places like Clemson, University of Texas, and Florida State?
Greg, let me just say that I am so heartened by what I just heard from Travis just a minute ago, and then the other people commenting and what you're doing today. Because Reinhold Niebuhr wrote in his book, Moral Man or Moral Society, that privileged groups rarely give up or share privilege without great and strong resistance. That speaks to point one of what Travis talks about. Dr. King talked about how the ultimate measure of a man and woman, if you will, is not measured in time of convenience and content, but rather in time of trial and contempt. None of this matters until you're in those pressure situations. That's where your true character is going to be revealed. You know, the crisis doesn't really make the person, male or female. It merely exposes where they are at any given point in time. So I think Travis nailed it, absolutely, and I think the other two young ladies on the call nailed it with respect to education. Selvin alluded to it as well. You know, I was on a call just the other morning, and a gentleman ended the call by asking me what I was going to do for the 4th of July. And, Greg, it was tongue-in-cheek, and you know me well enough to know that I'm joking when I said it. I just kind of off the cuff said, well, I'm going to binge watch Roots. And there was this kind of like uncomfortable quiet, you know, and I was kind of telling him that, hey, it's kind of a joke, but not really. It was almost like he didn't understand, and he acknowledged it, that in 1776, people who looked like me weren't free. So we weren't necessarily celebrating the 4th of July with the same mindset and the same context. And until the majority culture understands that it is possible for the 40-plus million African Americans that are in this country, there is a bit of a different purview. Am I patriotic? Absolutely. Greg, I don't think you've ever seen me with a jacket on where I don't have the American flag on my lapel. And the reason why I wear it, because it represents what America is going to be in her best days. The construct of America, I'm on board with it. But I'm also ready to challenge every individual that's in a position of power to influence, and as Travis alluded to a minute ago, put their money where their mouth is. You know, I don't use the word racist very loosely because it's a very serious one, but I will define it for us quickly. Racism is prejudice plus power. There are a lot of people walking around who may utter the N-word, who may say certain things, but if they're not occupying positions of power, they're not really a concern to me, really. I'm concerned about that person who's sitting in an elevated position of authority who harbors bias, and that bias plays its way out with respect to the decisions that they make with respect to hiring and so forth. Those are the people that we need to influence, and until we see them move, to Travis's point, no real change is going to take place in this nation.
Brennan, what does it mean to you? Oh, go ahead, Travis.
Go, and I'll say this, Spencer, I'm glad you said that because, you know, speaking once again to somebody, I love this whole conversation because, and I love the national conversation. Why? Because it lets all those guys who think that way peek their head out, and they always do something. I mean, we've seen it with Dabo. We've seen it with I'm a man, I'm 40. We've seen it with all of these with these coaches that always they continue to show their bias. We've seen these guys for years and years, and we've seen their true thoughts for years and years. And it's funny because now it's like, oh, I didn't know that offended you. Oh, so you didn't know this. Now all of a sudden you know it and you're still doing it. So don't get me started, Greg, because I can go off on a tangent about some of these people, especially some of these head coaches that are in power at big universities that for years have done this to their group of black men and the way they've treated them, and because there is no recourse, they have no, like, the kids have no power. Right now, the kids' power is the social media. It's their voice. That's why the needle's moving right now, because now nothing can go on without the outside world finding out. When I was in college, when you were in college, when Spencer was in school, when Brandon was in school, they could take you behind the woodshed and beat the mess out of you. You know what I'm saying? And you would never find out. Why? Because we had no voice. And I'm glad that these kids now, these young men, are bringing it to light, because guess what? All of the ones who've been hiding behind that cloak and dagger, all the ones who've been hiding behind that NCAA shield, they're starting to peek their way out. They're starting to peek their way out. Mike Gundy, if he wasn't winning games, he would have been fired the other week. If Dabo Swinney wasn't winning national championships, he would have been fired a couple weeks ago. So guess what? Now it got to get to the point where, guess what? I don't care what your national championship pedigree is. I don't care what you're doing. If you can't treat all of these students equally, if you can't treat all of these men like men, whether white, black, or indifferent or in between, then guess what? There's no place for you in my university. When the university start doing that, then we can start really talking about different things and making changes.
Brennan, what does it mean to you when you see your teammates, Deshaun Watson, your former teammate DeAndre Hopkins, call for change at Clemson with the removal of John C. Calhoun's name from the Honors College, and they get very fast results?
Man, I think it's huge for guys like D4 and Hop to call out the universities, because at the end of the day, these men, whether it's Calhoun or some of these guys whose statues are being torn down, these men have to answer to their sins, and I think that, back in the time where it was widely accepted with segregation or slavery, they didn't have to answer to those sins. But now today, what we're in the process of doing is rewriting history, right? And I think that, what Trav is saying is 100%. It's one thing to listen, and then it's the next step, like, okay, we're going to take down this name. But this is another thing to continue the action of really, really trying to move the needle, right? When the Black Lives Matter movement, is not as pertinent, next year as it is today, are these schools still trying to make the significant change that needs to be made? And what that change is also, I think, for me, something that is important to point out. Like, what is that in the structure that we're trying to change? I think, your example with Deshaun and Hop, they said specifically the John C. Calhoun, like, we want that name out of there. They were very specific about it, and it got done. So I think on our side of things, having the platform, it really is important to equip ourselves with the knowledge to figure out what exactly it is that, needs to be changed. And I think that the people that, have that knowledge need to make sure that their voices are heard. So then we know, we work together, and we're united in asking for that. And I think, that's really an important platform. So when I see guys like D4 and Hop, use their voice, to make changes like that, I think it's important, and that's the example.
Natalie, USA Swimming has publicly condemned racism and admitted publicly that progress has been too slow. What do those words mean to you, and is that enough?
Yeah, like everyone was saying, words are obviously good to hear as a good start for things, but action is most important, especially right now. But as national teamers, we have, a very small percentage of us are Black. We met with the president of USA Swimming, and we're able to come to an agreement on some things that we would like to see in the future. And I wholeheartedly believe that USA Swimming is going to deliver those actionable items, within the next 1 to 2 years. And some of those examples are, funding a national Black Heritage Swim Meet that has been going on for years, and hasn't been funded. And it's little things like that I think are going to start to show people that, there are actions behind these words, and, they do foster inclusion, and we do want to get more African-American kids onto teams, and we do want to get them that exposure that, the rest of us did have. We were fortunate to have that. But a lot of Black young children are not fortunate enough to, even learn how to swim. So, putting money forth towards that, and also being on a team, a competitive team that would give them that competitive edge to be able to elevate themselves throughout the sport to get to the national level. So in terms of USA Swimming, they've been very receptive to what we've been saying. We've had really good discussions, and I think that within the next 1 to 2 years, I think we'll start to see some awesome things happening with diversity and inclusion within our sport.
Jamia, what steps would you like to see taken not only in soccer in this country, but around the world?
Well, it starts with, as Natalie mentioned as well, education, having these uncomfortable conversations, continuing to use our platforms. I mean, I see a lot of movement around the soccer world, and specifically in our league. It's been great, the support, and we're thinking about starting a Black PA and things like that have never come up in the past is great. And so we just need to continue to make action and not have those uncomfortable conversations.
Jimmy, if I could follow up with you, what did it mean to you to see players from the English Premier League taking the pitch in kit that featured Black Lives Matter, and some of those players actually took a knee as well?
Well, that was huge because that's such a big league. I guess it's equivalent to the NFL here, or in England, you could say even bigger. So that platform is huge, and they just have such a big voice, and that's what we need. We need powerful people to use their voice and to continue to just take action, really. And so I was just thankful to see that. And soccer, too, being a predominantly white sport, giving us a voice, giving us Black players a voice during this time has been huge.
Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem nearly 4 years ago and eventually lost his place in the National Football League. What is Kaepernick's legacy now, and does the NFL owe him a public apology? Travis, can we start with you?
Well, I think everybody's owed him an apology. It's not just the NFL. I think they allowed the NFL, for one, NFL is reactive when they have the power to be proactive, and they had the power to support from day one when he spoke on the causes and he spoke on the reasons. They allowed politics to hijack the message. They allowed the president to hijack the message. They allowed people who thought Black folks should keep in their place to hijack this message. Went from day one, and I heard Jamia say it. I heard Natalie say it earlier when they talked about I have people in the military. I have friends here, friends there. You shouldn't have to say that. When I tell you my reasoning, all of a sudden it's that's not your real reason. That's not your real reason. So yes, I think the NFL owes him an apology. I think a lot of more people than just the NFL owes him an apology, because now they want to be on the right side of history. Now they want to say, oh man, I see what's going on. Yo, you saw this from the beginning. You chose not to. You chose to turn the other eye. You chose to turn your back on it. You chose to speak different when you knew what the issues were. The issues hadn't changed. The issues hadn't changed. It's been around. It's been around for the 400 years of slavery. It's been around from the Jim Crow. It's been around from the Civil Rights Movement. It's been around from the 80s, the crack epidemic in the neighborhood. It's been around for decades, for centuries. And when he spoke up, everybody knew. They just didn't care until it became the cool thing to care. Now all of a sudden they're saying like, okay, we apologize, we do this. Your actions will speak louder than anything else. Like we continue to talk about. The end of the day is everybody knew and they turned their back on him. And I would love to see him get apology. Do I see him getting another job in the league? No. You know what I'm saying? Because I know how this league is. It stands for not for long. You know what I mean? But the end of the day the apology would be a start. But I think actions are going to be major. Actions will be major. That's all. I mean, nothing more I can say about that, Greg. You know what I mean?
I understand. Selvin Young, what do you think Kaepernick's legacy should be?
Pioneer, leader, tone setter. For a guy like that to make a statement like that, and to have a military person tell him, hey, from a military standpoint, from someone who fought for this country, I would prefer you to take the knee and do it and make your statement that way. And, like Travis said, the whole situation gets hijacked for whatever political movement that was at the time to basically take away from, the movement that it would have gained with that type of a platform, because the NFL is a very huge platform, and right away it was in waves. And so to try to control or corral that narrative to another way, it's like, okay, well, let's find something to say that everyone can be a part of being against it, which was against our country, against our rights to freedom and stuff like that. And, basically a guy was saying, I'm taking a knee literally for the lives of men that has been lost unjustly and wrong. So for me, I'm always appreciate Colin Kaepernick and be thankful that I got to see something like that in my lifetime, because we know what happened to a lot of those guys who followed behind. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people lost their livelihood and across all the other sports. And for me, I say pioneer. I'm, thankful for a guy like that. I'm hoping that it inspired a lot of more guys to make a move for the cause, for right, for history, and not so much for the present. Giving of yourself for a cause is what I feel like a guy like him really did. And, for me, I say pioneer. I appreciate it. I do look forward to apologies from the NFL, which was somewhat given. I would like to see apology from the president. I would like to see apology from all of those big donors or sponsors that pulled ads and pulled stuff away that are now saying, okay, we're going to, start to support and put money into this black community or into this community or this community. I like those guys to come out and say, hey, we pulled our money because we thought this guy was doing this for this reason. And we are woke that we see that literally, a man's life has been lost because the officer took a knee in his neck. It couldn't get any more literal than that. So apologies are definitely needed across the board. Understanding and respect is definitely needed. I look forward to the day it happens.
Brendan, how do you view what Colin Kaepernick did, willing to give up essentially his career to take that stand for social justice reform and, in his own words, simply an end to police brutality?
Yeah, I think pioneer, as Selvin said, that's a great word. I would also tack on leader onto that. He made one of the biggest sacrifices, I think we can ever make, which is, give up his livelihood and knowingly, doing that. And to do it, years before what we're going through now is happening. But, as Travis said, this stuff has been going on since, this country was founded. So, for Cap to point those out when he did and be willing to sacrifice, and, for as many people told him, they wanted him to stand, the whole coaches and owners telling, the whole league to stand, and he, continued to take a knee and ultimately lost his job for it. It's crazy to think about even a couple years later, but I think he'll go down in history. I would love to see him get a job. He was a good quarterback. Would love to see him get a job. And I think an apology, a specific, explicit apology to that man is warranted by the executives in the league. And whatever more beyond that, I think that the league has kind of taken the stance that, they're willing to support the social justice initiative. I'd like to see that go further. I'd like to see them be more specific on what that actually means. There's millions of dollars that's being donated somewhere. What kind of active hand are they taking in that, in the direction of those funds? I think I don't think it's right to hand off, millions of dollars to certain groups and just say that you've done enough. I don't think that's right. I think for an organization as powerful as the NFL, there should be an active hand. There should be resources, other than just money. It should be time, energy, manpower dedicated to, to righting the wrongs and trying to fight this battle.
Spencer Tillman, what has it been like for you as a national, a guy who has a national platform, watching the views of Colin Kaepernick change so dramatically in the last few months?
Great question. I had the privilege of playing for the 49ers and Dr. Harry Edwards, who was instrumental in orchestrating the 1968 efforts by John Carlos as he held up the Black Power signal after winning the bronze medal in the 200 meters. I think for me, Greg, every event leaves bibliography and footnotes. And I would put what Colin Kaepernick did with respect to the sacrifice and the fact that he's not back in the National Football League now, I'd put it right up there with what John Carlos did because of the proliferation of the internet, the many platforms, the number of people who see it. I put it right up there. And I can't believe it's been 53 years since Muhammad Ali right here in Houston, Texas, was ushered out of that facility for refusing to be inducted into the military. I think it was Colonel Edwin McGee that escorted him out there in Houston. And that moment, and then transferring forward and pushing forward, holding that cauldron in '96 in Atlanta, I mean, what happened in between that time? I mean, it's amazing the patina of time and what it does for our image and impression. So in hindsight, I would put Colin Kaepernick's actions right up there. It's kind of hard to do that now because it's still relatively fresh, just 4 years, and time does a number on it in a positive way. And I think, but when we look 15, 20, 30 years down the road, it'll be up there in that same level.
Natalie Hinds, what do you appreciate about the stand that Colin Kaepernick was willing to take?
I mean, at the time, I was in college, and I think that it was said earlier, like when you're in college, you are not, I know I wasn't really totally aware of all the social injustice that was going on just because I was so wrapped up in my sport. So at the time, I thought it was a very courageous move, but I don't think I fully understood what it took for him to do that, what he lost doing that. And I mean, honestly, the past 2 years, I think, have really opened my eyes, like, since I've been out of college and I've been able to do more research and just become more aware of the history of, you know, racism in sports and racism in general. Do I fully understand the impact that he's had? Obviously, like everyone has said, he is a leader. He's a pioneer. I think it really helps you and makes you reflect on your own sport and kind of, you know, what are some things, you know, it gets you thinking about your sport and trying to just run down through and try to think about, you know, what are some of the experiences that I've had in my sport that would lead me to do something like that. But I think what he did for me was just give me, was kind of a catalyst for me to understand the whole situation and why he did what he did and how that impacts my life in the sport of swimming.
Jamia, does Colin Kaepernick's stand resonate with you? Does it resonate in the soccer world?
Definitely. Going off of what Natalie said, at the time, I don't think I fully understood, nor did I really dig in to see, you know, like his actual, you know, reasoning behind, obviously, the stuff that was, you know, on social media, etc. But no, his actions definitely inspired me during this time to do what I did this year during the anthem, and, you know, with the same fears of, you know, maybe it would go that way for me if, you know, if I kneel during the anthem, will I lose my job? But he really inspired me just to, you know, I see the impact that he's had, and it definitely made me feel like it's worth it. You know, whatever comes with it is worth it, because I see that his actions are making movement. It is bringing change slowly but surely. So yeah, he definitely inspired me.
There have been a variety of reactions to NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace and what happened at Talladega. What do each of you take away from the image of NASCAR drivers and crew members lining up behind Bubba Wallace as he took the track at Talladega? I'd like to begin with Selvin, if we could.
You kind of cut out on me right there. Say that again.
Yeah, just the very powerful image of NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace at Talladega with all of the other drivers and crew members lining up in support of him. What do you take away from that?
That, you know, when I saw that, I just saw, you know, first I saw a clip of it and I seen everyone behind the guy. I mean, I kind of got goosebumps, you know, to see, and that's what I like about sports. You know, when it doesn't matter. You know, before the game, after the game, when we're going against each other, we all going against each other because we've been doing this most of us our entire lives. You know, since we were kids, we had dreams and aspirations and thoughts of doing it on the highest level and being the best. And when you're going against your competitors, and then you see a moment like that when people that you respect, people that's on your same level, people that you go against to compete with, and you know they take the time out or take the moment to say, "Hey, I'm with you. I stand with you. I understand what's going on in the world, but I'll show you right now, hey, what side of this thing that I'm on." And each one of those guys, you know, I want to say a lot of those guys did it because they're really on the right side of things here. And, you know, for what was portrayed to us that, you know, a noose was being actually hung purposely to basically, you know, rile up or just, you know, throw flame on the fire. Thank God that wasn't the case. But to see that, you know, those guys come and stand behind him like that, you know, man, I would love to see the United States of America stand behind, you know, all black people that way, you know, and say, hey, we're on this side. And, you know, I think that's what's needed. And so how I felt about it, I thought I got a little goosebumps behind it when I saw that picture. I was appreciative.
Travis Johnson, what did you think of the moment?
Well, I thought the moment was cool, as far as, my initial reaction, to be honest with you, Greg, my initial reaction was somebody behind him is the guy who fashioned the noose in the first place. So I'm like, dude, yeah, you got everybody behind you. Maybe you want them in front of you. But at the same time is, my issue is that once again, the facts of the matter were hijacked based on, it's funny because, when black people, when we tell you there's a problem, all of a sudden it's, oh, you're not living the same life we live in, or you don't no, we don't believe it. And for somebody for not only did Bubba not report it himself, but for a member of his crew and for everybody to do the right thing, for the member of the crew to see it and report it to NASCAR, NASCAR calls the feds, and then all of a sudden it's still all of it is put on Bubba as saying he's the one who did this, he's the one who started this. I think it's a microcosm. We talk about the locker room being a microcosm of life. I think it's a microcosm of how black folks are treated as saying, no matter what happens, no matter what the fact is, we still gonna put it on you. And we've seen that today with the president's tweet directly towards him, asking him to apologize. So you take me out back and whip me, and I'm supposed to apologize to you? Like, how is that possible? So, I think it was great for those guys to stand up with him because, for me, one, I love NASCAR. I enjoy watching NASCAR. I don't like watching on TV, but in person, I love NASCAR. And I think it's a great sport, and there's a lot of technicalities that go into it. But I still had so much animosity towards the fact that everybody's like, oh, it's a hoax, it's a hoax, it's a hoax. Dude, somebody still fastened the noose. I don't know at what grade level you learn to make a noose, but I've never learned how to tie a knot in a noose way. So even if it was a pulley or whatever, I think the fact of the matter, it still is what it is. I think when they did the research, they found out all the real facts. But I'm just glad that those guys decided we're going to stand with him because we know what type of man he is. We know his character, and we know the truth. It still was there. The facts are the facts. But I'm glad they supported because it was the right thing to do.
Brennan, in your mind, does the fact that everyone stood with him and stood behind him, does that override the criticism that all of his fellow drivers and crew members have stood behind him, and you see people like seven-time champion Jimmie Johnson saying, there's a lot that I need to learn about this. My eyes were not nearly as open as they should have been.
Yeah, no, I think it's important, and going back to talking about unity and togetherness and trying to make real change. I think that's where it starts, right? Is everybody getting on the same page. And, we saw in NASCAR with everybody rallying around Bubba and just showing their support and love for the man. I think that's where it starts, and I think that at the end of the day, when we talk about change and action, I think that same type of unified support is what we're going to have to continue to see. It can't just be on the day that all the cameras are out there, and it's headlines, but not actually like down the line, where there's a fight to change a policy that's going to result in a more equitable society. Like, all right, where's that same support? Like, let's make sure we continue to be together and unified. But in that particular moment, that's just such a strong and powerful picture, to see all of those guys behind him and everybody supporting him, especially, in NASCAR, which is, historically and today a majority white sport. But everybody showing the support and the longing for equality and for the right treatment of everybody in this country. I think it's important, and I think it needs to continue.
Natalie, what did you think of the moment, and what would you think of getting that kind of support perhaps in your sport of swimming?
So I'm not really a NASCAR follower, so for me to see something like that, I look at it very objectively, and I think it speaks a lot to his character and, his platform within the sport of NASCAR for everyone to rally behind him like that. And with the events, I know, you hear about all of these positive small events that are happening, at the start of Black Lives Matter movements and up until now. And I think this is another one of those that, can continue this snowball effect towards change and towards a better future. And for, if we were to relate this to swimming, I think, I don't know if people can let you win per se, but I think being able to speak out on someone's behalf or to acknowledge something or, have those uncomfortable conversations on deck, where the atmosphere would obviously be a lot different than, in the hotel before the competition or after the competition, I think would be similar situation. And that would be something that I would personally be very, very grateful for, just as I'm sure Bubba was grateful for everyone's support around him during that time. But yeah, like I said, I think these small changes and these small wins that, African Americans are getting are just starting that snowball effect towards a better future.
Jamia, I've got a note that you might need to head out and get some treatment so you can continue playing soccer for the Dash. Is there something you'd like to share before you need to go?
Yeah, going off of what everyone's been saying about Bubba's situation, the support that he received was great, but just to agree with everyone, the action needs to continue, especially in a predominantly white sport, just like soccer. These big organizations have to continue to support us, and not just on that day. But I want to thank you for having me. Platforms like this is what's going to continue to bring change. And so I'm very thankful. And everyone who's on here, continue to use your voice, and I know I will too. And yeah, I'm thankful, and I need to go get treatment before I get in trouble.
Don't get treatment, don't get in trouble. We are very thankful for you. Good luck to you in the Dash, Jamia. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Spencer Tillman, I'm going to continue with this topic perhaps in a different vein with you. This afternoon, Bubba Wallace tweeted out that love will always win over hate. Do you believe that tonight?
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. And again, to tie it into your previous question and then to bring the love aspect of it back in, Greg, for good or bad, we live in a world of images and impressions, and most people aren't willing to pull away the veneer, but formats like this allow us to do a little bit of that. And if we can put that little bit of consideration in their mind to think about some of these bigger issues, it's significant. I think Tyler Reddick, by the way, another NASCAR driver who came out and was supportive of Bubba after the president made his comments, I think that to me speaks volumes, and that's what you need. And then the king himself, Richard Petty, to have Bubba Wallace driving for him. I mean, those two things are an extension of what we need. We need people who look like the majority culture to come out and to side with us, because again, it's like Dr. King quoted. He says, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But when you're in an environment that we're in, it's going to take people who are part of the majority culture to understand those transgressions, understand that these things don't happen in a vacuum, and that you're talking about systemic racism. And until we can all agree that there are a list of things that we need to attack and be relentless in attacking them, we don't change the infrastructure of America, we will never, ever come out of this morass that we're in right now. So we've got to go back and look at the institutional constructs, dismantle them, and then replace them with something that's more sound, more empathy involved in it, and something that reflects the ideals that are aligned in that preamble in the Constitution that we have.
I hate that we are running short on time, so we'll have one final question. Is this a time and a moment that we will look back on 50 years from now and 100 years from now and realize that this was the beginning of the end of racism in this country? Travis Johnson, you so eloquently said that actions are what matter, so I will let you lead the way here.
Your question, Greg, was is this the start of the end of racism?
Yes.
I would, you know what, Greg, the optimist in me would like to say yes. The realist in me is going to say no. I think it's a long way to even scratch the surface. I mean, there's so much policy. There's so many things that needs to be changed from the redlining of our neighborhoods to the funding of, the redlining, which is attached to the funding of our schools, which is attached to so many different things. I think it's so many things that has to be done before it can even say, we're getting started. It's great to start the conversation, but I think it's so much that's going to happen. I don't know if it happens in our lifetime, I mean, I pray and I hope, just like back in 2008, when you got to see 90-year-old black folks that were in tears because they never thought they'd see a black president. I just never, for my lifetime, I don't think we'll see the end to racism. But I pray every night that my kids and their kids' kids can see the end of it, because, that's what you want for your kids. You want for your kids, like Dr. King said, to be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. I pray that it is, but the realist in me would say no. And it's hard to say that, because then it almost means like this is for nothing. But I think it scratches the surface, but it's nowhere to say this started anything. I think it's just it's a minutia of the entire plan.
Brennan Scarlett, I would ask you that same question. What's the significance of what we're seeing unfold 50 years, 100 years from now?
I think part of me agrees with Travis that, to say that today is the beginning to the end of racism, I think that's a stretch. I think that, partly, we all have inherent human biases where, we're attracted to like groups, that's science. But I think what I hope is that today, and that this movement is a start to peel back some of the layers that, we see in the system, are from the federal level down to, local and state governments, that, these policies and these systems were created with that, racist human bias in mind, right? And they were created purposely to disadvantage, black and brown people. And so I think that, hopefully today is a start to peel back some of those. Just as, you said Deshaun and Hawk, they were putting out stuff and saying that they needed to get rid of the name on, one of the buildings. Well, that's a start. Now we're unraveling some of the stuff that's been in place for a long time. But okay, now it's a step further, and actually looking into, as Spencer said, the actual structures of things, and see if we can't make them closer to, to matching and being more, a little closer to the preamble in the Constitution, and now having known how the past, hundreds of years have gone, let's see if we can't turn the dial a little bit and make it a more equitable place for us all. And so, if anything, I hope that's what this movement starts, and eventually, ridding our country of racism. I think that's the end goal. But as Trav said, it's going to take a long time. So maybe, today, the first actionable step is let's change some of the, racist policies and things that were created to hold a group of people down, economically, educationally, all of these things. And let's start to address those.
Natalie, I want to ask you that question perhaps in a little bit different vein. Does the movement that has gained traction recently, does it have staying power in this country, in your opinion?
I think it has staying power if people are receptive to learning and they're receptive to keeping it going, in terms of, I think a lot of people have their head in the sand. A lot of people who say they aren't racist, they say they don't see color and all of those types of things. I've come to learn that a lot of people just don't want to deal with the confrontation, because confrontation is very uncomfortable, obviously. But it's not until I feel like you educate people and they come face to face with this situation that they've been trying to avoid, will you start to see change. For people who claim that, they are supportive of the movements, this and that, for them to say that, but they don't really have any education to back it, or they don't really know what they're fighting for, to me is an empty fight. So I think being able for people to be able to help, for white people to be able to help and close that gap, they're going to have to take these movements that we're seeing and understand the reason why. Why are black people so mad? Why are black people so tired? They're going to have to, they can't turn to us for all the answers. They're going to have to research And I feel like that is the only way that this can help in the future. This is the only way that, like you said, 50 years from now, we'll look back. I don't think racism will be over. I think if, more people than now are educated about what's going on and why it's going on and what has happened in the past, I think it will pose for a better future because they're making educated decisions. They'll finally uncover and come face to face with the systemic injustices that we as Black people face every single day that they either had no idea about or that they just turned a blind eye to.
Selvin, Natalie brings up a great point about the educational aspect of all of this. If people are willing to educate themselves, what difference can that make for us as a society, sports obviously included?
Knowledge is power. And educating starts early on for a lot of us African Americans. Like Travis was saying, there's some systematic, there's some institution divide. And I think, like Spencer was saying, a lot of the situations won't begin to change until there's movement in power structure. Where there's power and there's institution, there's some movements that can be made as far as the schools, the University of Texas, the Florida States, the Clemsons. And there's some moves that could be made there. There's some big moves that could be made on a financial side where, big corporations and big companies can allow some of the African Americans to move up to basically spread the wealth that can come back down in some of our communities and stuff like that. And so I do feel like when there's more people in power that has the position to make those things change and make institutional changes and make more, acts like the Fair Housing Acts and, to look back on stuff like the, back in the 60s, civil rights. I mean, if we're looking at to say a change of racism, we would have thought that would have been the moment. We're almost 50 years now looking at another restart. If there was a big change of momentum, it has to be within the power structures. And I do think being educated and learning where those power structures are to actually be able to make a real move to see something that happens in 50 years from now. Can we double, triple, quadruple, tenfold, 100-fold more Black CEOs and more big Black corporations, big businesses, more opportunities for families and generation to basically come up in a more of an educated way, to be more empowered. I think it's going to be difficult to say if there's a change starts now, and understanding, listening. We've been, speaking and knocking the same doors and same walls and marching down the same streets with the same thing for so long. And the only way I think we can say something is going to change is those people in those positions of power start to stand back and say, I got my foot on the pedal and basically it's the brake and I'm stopping, generational change and opportunity for people to say, well, we have people of color in more positions of power. So if we was to say things could change, some of those people who have been denying that access to that power open the door for more people of color, people that are educated on stuff, that with experience, and having a good understanding of community, Black oppression as an overall. I think then we can start to look at if things will start to change. Right now, I like the conversations. I like the movement. I like the people that are standing up. I pray that things are for the righteous and for safe, nonviolent type things like that. But I do believe the power struggle is going to be in the powerful. And, we're going to have some of these people in power positions open up the door for more African Americans, for us to look in 50 years from now to see if some of these red lines and some of these Fair Housing Acts and different things that are already institutionally written to disenfranchise, like Brennan was saying, is coming to pass. All of those lines where people went back rooms writing, hey, well, we'll do this and this will kind of carve them out. Someone has to be able to be educated to look at where are those divisions being divided and bring those to light and find a way to rewrite that wrong. It's going to be a long journey, but that's my thought on it.
Spencer Tillman, I can see you shaking your head in agreement with much of what Selvin had to say there, particularly perhaps that we've been marching in these same streets for 50 years. What resonates about that as you ponder this movement and the potential for significant change in social justice reform?
I'm encouraged, Greg, and I think the cautious optimism that Brennan and Travis showed is warranted based on history. But I think there are a couple of things in play. Number one, and again, I know that Natalie's on the call in her swimming background. Since we've got a majority of football players, I'm going to use this metaphor because I think it works for everybody on the call. It kind of reminds me of what in football, when a quarterback comes to the line of scrimmage, he's trying to do three things, right? He's trying to discern threats, and then he's going to call a play that gives him the best chance to succeed against that perceived threat, and then he's got to execute the play. So it's a 1, 2, 3 thing. But just like Brennan said and Selvin ended up a minute ago, it's more difficult. And I think mainstream America needs to understand that this is going to be as much or more difficult for them to adjust to than even people who have been the object of that bias for 400 plus years. But I think the convergence of three factors in the last 20 seconds here, I think the three factors that we're dealing with is the COVID-19 crisis, which exposed our economic vulnerabilities, and then the Floyd George event. I think those three coming together creates an inflection point that makes me a little bit more bullish than perhaps Travis and Brennan were on this point. But I think that they're, based on history, justified in having the reservation that they have, Greg. So I think that we're in a positive place, and I think we're going to get to the point where we can do more and expect more if we hold everyone accountable that has a stake in this interest.
Well, I cannot thank you enough, you guys, for your time. Travis, I know, is with his children at maybe a soccer practice or something, and he's hung in there with us, and we appreciate that. All of you for your time, your great insights, and your willingness to share with everyone your thoughts on a topic that needs deep discussion, and this is the platform that allows us to do that. So thank you, one and all. Thank you for joining us, and we certainly hope that we can stay in touch as this country continues to evolve and hopefully make significant and meaningful and lasting change. So thank you to everyone.
You bet. Thank you, Greg.
I appreciate you having me. Hey, Natalie,
Thanks,
go
Greg.
Noles.
Go Gators.